The flashing red and blue lights cut through the cold night like knives, reflecting off the rain-soaked asphalt. The young nurse froze beside her small, worn sedan, her heart pounding so loudly it felt like the entire empty parking lot could hear it. A police officer stood only a few feet away, his hand resting near his holster, his voice sharp and humiliating as he barked the words that would echo in her mind long after this night was over. "Hands up, B*tch. In that moment, everything inside her seemed to collapse. Not because she had done anything wrong, but because sometimes the world decides who you are before you even get the chance to speak. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second to support the channel. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and standing up for the people who deserve respect, make sure to like the video, share it with someone who believes in humanity, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these powerful stories reach more people. The young nurse's name was Emily Carter. She was 24 years old, fresh out of nursing school, and barely 6 months into her first job at a busy emergency department. Her days were filled with exhaustion, long shifts, and the constant pressure of life-or-death situations. Yet despite the chaos, she carried a quiet determination inside her. She had grown up in a small town where her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, and Emily had promised herself that one day she would become someone who helped others survive their darkest moments. That evening had already been brutal. The hospital had been overwhelmed with patients. Car accidents, heart attacks, overdoses. Emily had barely sat down during her 12-hour shift. When she finally left the building, the sky was dark, rain falling steadily, the cold air cutting through her thin jacket. She just wanted to go home. But only a few minutes after leaving the hospital parking lot, flashing lights appeared behind her. Confused, she pulled over near a quiet roadside area outside the hospital district. The officer approached her car with aggressive steps. He looked to be in his late 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hardened with impatience. Emily rolled down her window, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. She tried to speak calmly, but the officer's expression never softened. Instead of asking questions politely, he immediately accused her of suspicious behavior. He said she had been driving erratically. Emily tried to explain that she had just finished a 12-hour shift and was simply tired, but the explanation seemed to irritate him more. Within seconds, the situation escalated. The officer ordered her out of the car. Rain soaked through Emily's hair as she stepped onto the pavement. Her hospital badge still hung around her neck, her scrubs wrinkled and stained from the long shift. She felt embarrassed standing there in the rain under the flashing lights. Then the words came. "Hands up, B*tch." The insult landed like a slap. Emily felt her chest tighten with humiliation. Her hands slowly lifted into the air, not out of guilt, but out of fear. Cars occasionally passed in the distance, their headlights briefly illuminating the humiliating scene. The officer circled her vehicle like a predator searching for something to justify his anger. He opened the trunk, searched through her bag, even dumped some medical notes onto the wet ground. Emily stood there silently. She had spent the entire day helping strangers survive trauma. She had held the hands of patients who were dying. She had comforted families whose worlds had collapsed in hospital hallways. Yet here she was, treated like a criminal. Her eyes filled with tears, but she refused to cry. Then something unexpected happened. A black SUV slowly rolled into the empty lot nearby. At first, neither Emily nor the officer paid attention to it. The vehicle parked quietly about 20 feet away, its engine humming softly in the rain. The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out. He moved with the calm, controlled posture of someone who had spent years in disciplined environments. He wore dark civilian clothing, but there was something unmistakably authoritative about him. His shoulders were straight, his movements precise, and his eyes sharp as he took in the scene unfolding in front of him. The officer glanced over briefly but continued searching Emily's car. The man approached slowly. When he reached the edge of the flashing lights, his voice broke the tension in the air. A calm voice. Controlled. Firm. He asked the officer what was going on. The officer barely looked up. He brushed the question off dismissively, saying it was none of his business. But the man didn't move. Instead, he stepped closer. And then he saw Emily's hospital badge lying in the puddle on the ground. He picked it up carefully, wiping away the rainwater with his sleeve. His eyes studied the name printed on the badge. Emily Carter. Emergency nurse. When he looked back up at her, something changed in his expression. Recognition. Concern. And something else, anger. The officer finally turned toward him, clearly irritated now. He demanded to know who he was and why he was interfering. The man didn't raise his voice. He simply reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather identification wallet. When he opened it, the officer's entire posture changed. The irritation vanished from his face. In its place appeared shock. Because standing in front of him was Commander Daniel Hayes, a decorated Navy SEAL officer temporarily stationed nearby for training operations. Commander Hayes had spent years leading elite teams in some of the most dangerous environments in the world. He had seen battlefields, loss, and sacrifices that most people could never imagine. But what bothered him most in that moment was not the rain or the confrontation. It was the sight of a young nurse standing in soaked scrubs with her hands raised in humiliation. Commander Hayes asked a simple question. Why was the nurse being treated like a suspect? The officer suddenly seemed unsure of himself. His voice softened as he tried to explain that he was simply conducting a routine stop. But Hayes had already seen enough. He had watched the way Emily stood silently in the rain, her hands shaking slightly from exhaustion. He had seen the disrespect in the officer's tone. And that was something he would not ignore. Calmly but firmly, Hayes instructed the officer to lower his voice and treat her with respect. His authority didn't come from shouting. It came from the quiet confidence of someone used to command. The officer reluctantly stepped back. Emily slowly lowered her hands, unsure what had just happened. Commander Hayes handed her the wet hospital badge. For the first time since the stop began, someone looked at her not with suspicion, but with understanding. He asked if she was all right. Emily nodded weakly. The officer quickly returned her belongings to the trunk, his earlier aggression now replaced with awkward silence. Within minutes, he ended the stop and returned to his patrol car. The flashing lights faded into the distance. Rain continued falling, but the tension in the air had finally broken. Emily stood beside her car, still trying to process everything that had happened. Commander Hayes remained there for a moment longer, making sure she was safe before leaving. He told her something simple before turning back to his SUV. He told her that people who spend their lives saving others deserve respect. Not humiliation. Emily drove home that night feeling something she hadn't expected. Relief. Not because a commander had defended her, but because someone had seen her for who she truly was. A young nurse trying to make a difference in a difficult world. In the weeks that followed, the story quietly spread through the hospital and the local community. Some people heard about the confrontation. Others only heard that a Navy SEAL commander had stood up for a nurse who had been treated unfairly. But what mattered most was how the experience changed Emily. Instead of breaking her confidence, it strengthened it. She returned to work with renewed determination, reminding herself that even in moments of humiliation, dignity could still survive. Commander Hayes never asked for recognition. He simply returned to his duties. But Emily would never forget the night when someone stepped out of the darkness and reminded her that respect still mattered. Before we finish, there's something special I want to ask you. Comment the word respect if you believe every person who helps others, nurses, doctors, firefighters, and first responders, deserves to be treated with dignity. And if this story touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps spread stories that remind people the world can still be a place of courage, compassion, and unexpected heroes.